everyone, it's Shari Carroll for SimonsSaysStamp.com with a product to introduce to you for using with watercolors. This is FineLine masking fluid and also the applicator tips. FineLine applicators come in a couple different sizes, and I'll go ahead and show you how these work. The cap with nozzle is a three-part system, so I'll go ahead and unscrew this top part and you can see the nozzle where that will dispense the fluid, and also the wire cap. So that wire stays in the cap, and once you're done using the fluid that you have in your bottle, you go ahead and feed that right back into the nozzle and screw that down tight, and that becomes airtight. This size cap fits the FineLine bottles. They also make another size cap, and this is a bit wider on the opening, so that'll fit your bottles of paint. The nozzle tips also come in two different sizes. There's the 18 gauge and the 20 gauge. The 18 gauge is a bit larger than the 20. I'll go ahead and show you. You can see that's a little bit heavier looking. I'll also open this one up and I'll show them side by side. So I have the 20 gauge on the left and the 18 gauge on the right, and once I set that sideways you can see the difference in those two sizes. So depending on the amount of flow that you want, you can go ahead and change those out. So I really like that these come with an empty bottle. I could fill this up with glues or any other type of liquid that I wanted and use it on my artwork. What I find most interesting is the masking fluid, and this comes in a 1 1/4 ounce bottle. And what masking fluid is and how it's used as a barrier between your paper and your wet mediums, usually in watercolors. It can be really handy when using with your stamped images because you'll be able to mask anything off without cutting out papers. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how it flows out of the tip. It's quite fluid and it just comes right out of that tip, and you can almost draw with it. I'll show you an example of how and why I would use it. I have started off with some archival black ink and also the scribble flowers from Simon Says Stamp, and I've stamped some flowers onto my paper. What I want to do is keep my flower areas white so that I can create a background with other colors. The masking fluid will create the barrier that I need so that I can paint my entire background all at once, and I won't have to paint around my individual flowers. So I'll go ahead and uncap this off and start painting in the inside areas of my flowers. And I just kind of start in a circular motion. It really doesn't matter, just as long as you get the areas that you want filled in. I also want to add some color to my stems. As you can see, I've also drawn some lines across those stem lines. And I'll just go ahead and continue filling in my flowers, and then I will let this dry for about 20 minutes. My masking fluid's completely dry, and now it's time to add my background. So I'll be using some Distress Stain, and I'm using Scattered Straw. And I'll just be concentrating this in the center. And I am speeding this up a little bit so that I can get through this pretty quickly. I'm also using one of Tim Holtz's wet brushes, the watercolor brushes, and I'm just pulling that color out so that it fades out a little bit. What's nice about having the masking fluid there is that you can also use it as a palette. If you need to add more color, you can go ahead and just put it right on top of the masking fluid, and then you can go ahead and pull it out with your watercolor brush. So if I want just a real light color, I can just add a little bit right on top of those flowers. Again, I want to concentrate that color in the middle, so I'll be going back and adding more color as needed. But I'm generally just making about a rectangular kind of shape in the background of these flowers. I've let my stain completely dry, and now I'll go ahead and remove my masking fluid, and I'm just going to roll this with my finger. If you wanted to take your tweezers or whatever, you could go ahead and remove it with that, but I find it's just easy enough just to roll my finger, and now that leaves me that nice white paper to work with. To paint my flowers, I've chosen some of the Distress cubes, a paintbrush, and some water, and I'll be putting my cubes onto a block, and I'm speeding this up so I can get through this pretty quick for you. And I'm just laying down some water first, and then I'll be pressing my little ink cube onto my acrylic block, and then I'll be painting in my flowers. As I go along, I'll add in more color, and I'll dry this in between the layers of color. To get a little bit darker color, I'll use a little less water and I'll just continue to fill in until I have a nice variation of color as I go along. For my stems, I'm using a really fine tip brush and just kind of drawing that right along that white line where that masking fluid was, and also getting into the details of my leaves. Another tip that you might have noticed as I'm going along, I've left a little white area in the center of my flowers, and I'll be adding a little bit darker color around the outside. To finish my card off, I've wrapped the edges with some washi tape and added a greeting. I hope I've given you some inspiration on how to use the masking fluid and fine line applicator tips. Thanks for watching.